In this lecture, I want to talk about the expansion of the United States, the 19th century expansion westward. Let me begin by reading a quotation from the American Declaration of Independence, which was issued in 1776. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Wonderful words. But for me, the irony of the United States is that such words could be written by people who owned slaves, people who bought and sold other people, and continued to do so after issuing the Declaration of Independence. That a country founded on such wonderful principles could have expanded and conducted itself in such spectacular violation of these principles. The establishment of colonies in the New World in South and Central America was a major event in human history. When the first Europeans went to America in the late 15th century, of course they didn't discover it. There were already 20 or perhaps 40 million people living there. We are not sure exactly. South America and Central America had large populations, large towns, and well-developed economies. They were quite rich. And the Europeans, especially the Spanish and the Portuguese, went there and conquered these countries, stole much of their wealth, and of course many people were killed by the conquering Europeans, and of course many died of the diseases they brought. The population of North America was much smaller than that of South and Central America. We don't know exactly how many people were living there, of course, but it was possibly about 5 million people. These people are often referred to as Indians, although nowadays it's more politically correct to call them Native Americans. The Native Americans, in North America anyway, generally led quite simple lives. There were many different groups of them, and some of them were farmers, and some of them were hunters. Some lived in small villages. There were some small towns, and others lived in small groups in the forest. The first European settlers went to North America in the 17th century. Usually the Native Americans there treated the new settlers as neighbors. Often they helped them, and there are many, many famous stories about groups not surviving their first year of living in the United States, living in North America without help from the Indians. But, however, as more and more European settlers came to North America, relations between the settlers and the Native Americans often became very bad, and in many places wars developed between them. Probably the most important cause of these bad relations between the settlers and the Native Americans was the fact that both groups had very different ideas about the ownership of land. Many North American Indians did not believe in the individual ownership of land. They believed that the land belonged to everyone and you couldn't own it. This may seem like a strange belief to many of us, but in actual fact it's not such a strange belief at all. And we meaning most Europeans or North Americans anyway, we hold a similar idea about the sea. We think that no one owns the sea. It belongs to everyone. And so many North American Indians considered the land in the same way as we consider the sea, that it's that no one can own it. The settlers, of course, wanted to take the land for themselves. They had European ideas about land ownership. And not only did they want to take the land, they wanted to take a lot of land. In fact, they wanted to take it all. And there were other problems too. Many of the settlers from Europe considered the Native Americans as inferior people. Many of them even thought they were perhaps not real human beings. When the 13 colonies were established on the Atlantic coast, the 13 British colonies, many of the Native Americans were killed by the British and other European colonists. But then, when the United States became an independent country in 1783, the British government, as part of the settlement that established the country, gave them, or granted to them, a large area of land to the west of the colonies. Of course, this large area of land had very few white people, Europeans, living in it. Most of the people were living there, who were living there were Indians, and you could reasonably ask how come the British felt they had the right to give away other people's lands. But anyway, this what happened was that lots of Europeans, or people of white people, shall we call them, started to move west. They wanted land to start their own farms. And during the period from... The problem with that, of course, is as the settlers moved west and moved onto the land and took the land for themselves, the Native Americans really had a choice. They could either resist this, fight, or they could leave. And some left and some fought. But during this period, from about 1780 to 1880, the United States expanded from the small area on the eastern Atlantic coast and expanded to cover the whole of North America, of course south of Canada and north of Mexico. They expanded all the way to the Pacific coast. This was a huge area, and we're entitled to ask what happened to the Native Americans living in this large area. Well, it's a terrible story. At first, the United States government made agreements with many of these Native Americans, and the agreement said that they could continue to live on their land and so on and so forth. But most of the promises were broken by both the settlers, of course. The settlers moved west, just grabbing more land and often ignoring the government. And the promises were also broken by the government itself. And there were many wars, of course, and many Native Americans were killed. Just to give an example, in about 1850, there were approximately 100,000 Native Americans, American Indians, living in California. 10 years later, in 1860, there were only 35,000. Population had dropped to approximately one third of what it was before. The government, of course, tried to stop the fighting between the Indians by moving the Indians away to special areas of land called reservations. Of course, the reservations were usually on very poor land and land which the settlers didn't want. And of course, many of the Native Americans did not want to live like prisoners in some strange land, useless land. And many of them tried to avoid being taken away from their homes in this way. There is one tragic story. In 1877, one group of Native Americans set off and they they set off to walk 2,500 kilometers to the Canadian border to try and escape to Canada, to avoid being moved to a reservation. And tragically, they were captured only about 40 kilometers from the border. There is plenty of evidence that the United States government continually broke its promises to the Native Americans. And President Hayes, he was President of the United States, and he's quoted as saying that many, if not most, of our Indian wars have had their origin in broken promises and acts of injustice on our part. In other words, he admitted basically that the settlers and the government were bad. There are many, many terrible stories about how the Native Americans were treated. In 1864, for example, a group of soldiers attacked a peaceful Indian village in Sand Creek, Colorado, and 300 men, women and children were murdered and scalped by the American soldiers. Scalped means cutting off the top of the head, the scalp on the top of the head, as a souvenir. The officer who was in charge of the soldiers is reported to have told his men before they attacked, "Kill and scalp all, big and little." In other words, even the children. Of course, many of the Native Americans decided to fight and defend their land against the settlers who came to steal it. And there are many stories about this, and the Native Americans did have some victories, some very famous victories, but inevitably they lost, and they were taken away to reservations, and where they usually died of disease and alcoholism and such problems. The Native American Indians were killed by the soldiers of the U.S. Army, of course, but it wasn't so much but it was really the railways that defeated the Indians. From about 1860, railways started to be built across the United States, and soon there was a network of lines running to every area of the country. And thus in the fight between the Native Americans and the U.S. government soldiers, the government could send its soldiers by train very, very quickly to any place it wanted. The last battle that took place between the Indians and the U.S. soldiers was in 1890 at a place called Wounded Knee, where 170 Native Americans were killed. And it's worth noting that most of these were killed from behind while they were trying to run away. I mean, this is murder, of course. When Columbus came to America in 1492, there were probably about 5 million Native Americans living in the land that became the United States. By the year 1900, probably the population of Native Americans living in the United States was probably somewhere about 230,000. A terrible story indeed.